Guerrilla warfare is a special way of fighting. It is not like the battles you see in movies, where two big armies line up and charge at each other. Instead, guerrilla warfare is all about small groups using clever tricks to fight much larger and stronger enemies. The word guerrilla comes from Spanish and means little war. That's exactly what it is, a fight by the little guy against the giant. What makes guerrilla warfare unique is its focus on speed, surprise, and flexibility. Guerrilla fighters do not wear uniforms or march in neat lines. They blend in with the local people and strike when the enemy least expects it. They use the land to their advantage, hiding in forests, mountains, or even cities. Instead of trying to win big battles, guerrilla fighters aim to wear down the enemy over time. They attack quickly, disappear just as fast, and make it hard for the enemy to fight back. This kind of warfare is about patience and persistence, not brute strength. Because of these differences, guerrilla warfare often feels more like a game of hide and seek than a normal war. It's about outsmarting the enemy, not just outfighting them. Guerrilla tactics are used by people who don't have big armies or fancy weapons. These fighters are often outnumbered and outgunned. They might be local villagers, freedom fighters, or rebels. Sometimes they are ordinary people who pick up arms to defend their homes. These groups are not like regular soldiers. They don't have tanks, planes, or heavy equipment. Instead, they use what they can find: simple guns, homemade bombs, or even just sharp sticks. Their strength comes from their ability to move quickly and stay hidden. Guerrilla fighters often work in small teams. They know each other well and trust each other with their lives. They plan carefully and rely on good communication. Every member has a job, whether it's scouting the enemy, carrying supplies, or setting traps. Because they are small and flexible, guerrilla groups can strike anywhere. They can melt into the crowd after an attack or vanish into the hills. This makes them very hard for big armies to catch or defeat. Guerrilla fighters know their land better than anyone else. They use forests, rivers, caves, and villages to hide and move around. This local knowledge is a powerful weapon. It lets them escape quickly and find safe places to rest or plan their next move. But knowing the land is not enough. Guerrillas also need help from the local people. Villagers and townsfolk give them food, water, and information about enemy movements. Sometimes, they even hide fighters in their homes or barns. Without this support, guerrilla groups would struggle to survive. The people become their eyes and ears. They warn of danger, share news, and sometimes even join the fight. This bond between fighters and locals makes the group much stronger. The enemy army often tries to break this support by punishing villages or offering rewards. But as long as the people believe in the guerrillas' cause, they will keep helping. This makes it much harder for the enemy to win. Guerrilla warfare has shaped many famous battles in history. During the American Revolution, small groups of colonial fighters used hit-and-run attacks against British troops. They hid in the woods, attacked supply wagons, and vanished before the British could respond. In the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong used guerrilla tactics to fight the powerful United States military. They dug tunnels, set booby traps, and used the thick jungle to their advantage. Even though they were outnumbered, their clever tactics made life very hard for the American soldiers. Another example is the Soviet-Afghan War. Afghan fighters called Mujahideen used the mountains to hide from Soviet tanks and helicopters. They ambushed convoys, destroyed bridges, and blended in with local villagers. Their knowledge of the land and support from the people helped them resist the Soviet army for years. Each of these stories shows how small groups can stand up to much bigger armies by using guerrilla tactics. Their bravery and smart planning changed the course of history. Guerrilla tactics can turn the tide of war. Big armies often expect to win quickly because they have more soldiers and better weapons. But guerrilla fighters make every step dangerous. They force the enemy to use more troops just to guard supplies or patrol roads. This wears down the enemy over time. Soldiers get tired, supplies run low, and morale drops. The enemy may start to doubt if the war is worth fighting. Sometimes the cost becomes too high, and the bigger army decides to leave. Guerrilla warfare also spreads fear and confusion. The enemy never knows where the next attack will come from. This makes it hard to plan and even harder to feel safe. The constant threat can break the enemy spirit. By avoiding big battles and focusing on small, smart attacks, guerrilla fighters can slowly chip away at a much stronger opponent. This strategy has helped many underdogs win or survive against the odds. Guerrilla warfare works because it turns weakness into strength. Small groups cannot win by fighting head-on, so they use their speed, local knowledge, and support from the people. They keep the enemy guessing and make every move risky. This kind of fighting is not about winning fast. It's about lasting longer than the enemy and making the war too costly for them to continue. Guerrilla fighters use patience, clever tactics, and the trust of the people to stay in the fight. History shows that even the strongest armies can struggle against guerrilla tactics. When the underdog knows the land, has the people's support, and uses smart attacks, they can force a much bigger enemy to give up. In the end, guerrilla warfare is the art of survival and determination. It proves that even the smallest group can stand up to a giant, and sometimes win. An ambush is a surprise attack carried out by people lying in wait in a concealed position. The concealed position itself, or the concealed persons, may also be called an ambush. Ambushes as a basic fighting tactic of soldiers or of criminals have been used consistently throughout history, from ancient to modern warfare. The term ambush is also used in animal behavior studies, journalism, and marketing to describe methods of approach and strategy. In the 20th century, a military ambush might involve thousands of soldiers on a large scale, such as at a choke point like a mountain pass. Conversely, it could involve a small irregular band or insurgent group attacking a regular armed force patrol. Theoretically, a single, well-armed and concealed soldier could ambush other troops in a surprise attack. In recent centuries, a military ambush can involve the exclusive or combined use of improvised explosive devices, IED. This allows attackers to hit enemy convoys or patrols while minimizing the risk of being exposed to return fire. The use of ambush tactics by early people dates as far back as 2 million years, when anthropologists have recently suggested that ambush techniques were used to hunt large game. One example from ancient times is the Battle of the Trebia River. Hannibal encamped within striking distance of the Romans with the Trebia River between them and placed a strong force of cavalry and infantry in concealment near the battle zone. He had noticed, says Polybius, a place between the two camps, flat indeed and treeless, but well adapted for an ambuscade, as it was traversed by a watercourse with steep banks, densely overgrown with brambles and other thorny plants. And here he proposed to lay a stratagem to surprise the enemy. When the Roman infantry became entangled in combat with his army, the hidden ambush force attacked the Roman infantry in the rear. The result was slaughter and defeat for the Romans. Nevertheless, the battle also displays the effects of good tactical discipline on the part of the ambushed force. Although most of the legions were lost, about 10,000 Romans cut their way through to safety, maintaining unit cohesion. This ability to maintain discipline and break out or maneuver away from a kill zone is a hallmark of good troops and training in any ambush situation. Sabotage is a deliberate action aimed at weakening a polity, government, effort, or organization through subversion, obstruction, demoralization, destabilization, division, disruption, or destruction. One who engages in sabotage is a saboteur. Saboteurs typically try to conceal their identities because of the consequences of their actions and to avoid invoking legal and organizational requirements for addressing sabotage. Subversion, from Latin subvertere, overthrow, refers to a process by which the values and principles of a system in place are contradicted or reversed in an attempt to sabotage the established social order and its structures of power, authority, tradition, hierarchy, and social norms. Subversion can be described as an attack on the public morale and the will to resist intervention are the products of combined political and social or class loyalties which are usually attached to national symbols. Following penetration and parallel with the forced disintegration of political and social institutions of the state, these tendencies may be detached and transferred to the political or ideological cause of the aggressor. Demoralization is, in a context of warfare, national security, and law enforcement, a process in psychological warfare with the objective to erode morale among enemy combatants and/or non-combatants. That can encourage them to retreat, surrender, or defect rather than defeating them in combat. Demoralization methods are military tactics such as hit-and-run attacks, such as snipers disturbing the enemy with less lethal weapons and incapacitating agents, and intimidation, such as display of force concentration. Some methods on the strategic scale are commerce raiding, strategic bombing, static operations such as sieges and naval blockades, and propaganda. Morale is often perceived as a necessary precursor to success in international relations. Success most often goes to those who believe in their cause, as they more easily maintain a positive outlook that helps them work harder for it. High morale can directly contribute to an economy of food, textiles, fuel and other commodities, and to stimulate recruiting, employment in war industries, service in relief work, and the purchase of bonds. In an environment in which two belligerents compete, the chances of success greatly diminish if those whose actions are necessary lack faith in the justness of the cause or its chance for success, or are discouraged, morally defeated, disconsolate, antagonistic, sullen, inattentive, or lazy. Demoralization can be used to lessen the chances of success for an opponent by fostering these attitudes, and it can generally be done in one of two ways: demoralization through objective conditions or demoralization through perception. Demoralization through objective conditions most commonly takes the form of a military defeat on the battlefield that has tangible consequences directly resulting in the indicators of a demoralized party. But it can also result from an adverse physical environment where basic needs go unmet. Demoralization through perception, however, is the most commonly referred to means of demoralization, even though its operation and results, like political warfare and psychological warfare in general, are the most difficult to gauge. That is the form of demoralization that is referred to as a tool of psychological warfare, and it is most commonly implemented through various forms of propaganda. Propaganda as a tool of demoralization refers to influencing opinion through significant symbols, through means such as rumors, stories, pictures, reports, and other means of social communication. Other means of political and psychological warfare, such as deception, disinformation, agents of influence, or forgeries, may also be used to destroy morale through psychological means, so that belligerents start questioning the validity of their beliefs and actions. The word destabilization, alternatively destabilization, can be applied to a wide variety of contexts, such as attempts to undermine political, military, or economic power. The term divide and conquer in politics refers to an entity gaining and maintaining political power by using divisive measures. This includes the exploitation of existing divisions within a political group by its political opponents, and also the deliberate creation or strengthening of such divisions. The concept primarily refers to the practice of creating divisions between opponents to prevent them from uniting against a common foe, allowing the one who divides to gain or maintain political control. As a maxim, it is commonly recommended to political rulers. A secondary usage of the idea refers to the practice of dividing one's own forces or personnel so as to deal with different tasks simultaneously. The exact wording of the idiom in English is varied, including divide and rule, mainly in British English but rarely used, divide and conquer, in American the most common variation, divide and govern, and divide so that you may rule. Social disruption is a term used in sociology to describe the alteration, dysfunction, or breakdown of social life, often in a community setting. Social disruption implies a radical transformation in which the old certainties of modern society are falling away and something quite new is emerging. One social disruption might be caused through natural disasters, massive human displacements, rapid economic, technological, and demographic change, but also due to controversial policymaking. Social disruptions are, for example, rising sea levels that are creating new landscapes, drawing new world maps whose key lines are not traditional boundaries between nation-states, but elevations above sea level. On the local level, an example would be the closing of a community grocery store, which might cause social disruption in a community by removing a meeting ground for community members to develop interpersonal relationships and community solidarity. Solidarity or solidarism is an awareness of shared interests, objectives, standards, and sympathies, creating a psychological sense of unity of groups or classes. True solidarity means moving beyond individual identities and single-issue politics. Still, solidarity does not reject individuals and sees individuals as the basis of society. It refers to the ties in a society that bind people together as one. The term is generally employed in sociology and the other social sciences, as well as in philosophy and bioethics. It is a significant concept in Catholic social teaching and in Christian democratic political ideology. Although closely related to the concept of charity, solidarity aspires to change whole systems, not merely to help individuals. In urban sociology, fragmentation refers to the absence or underdevelopment of connections between a society and the grouping of certain of its members. These connections may concern culture, nationality, race, language, occupation, religion, income level, or other common interest. Citation needed. This gap between the people of interest and the rest of society may be social, indicating poor interrelationships; economic, based on structural inequalities; institutional, in terms of formal and specific political, occupational, educative, or associative organizations; or geographic, implying regional or residential concentration. In psychology, frustration is a common emotional response to opposition related to anger, annoyance, and disappointment. Frustration arises from the perceived resistance to the fulfillment of an individual's will or goal, and is likely to increase when a will or goal is denied or blocked. There are two types of frustration: internal and external. Internal frustration may arise from challenges in fulfilling personal goals, desires, instinctual drives and needs, or dealing with perceived deficiencies, such as a lack of confidence or fear of social situations. Conflict, such as when one has competing goals that interfere with one another, can also be an internal source of frustration or annoyance, and can create cognitive dissonance. External causes of frustration involve conditions outside an individual's control, such as a physical roadblock, a difficult task, or the perception of wasting time. There are multiple ways individuals cope with frustration, such as passive-aggressive behavior, anger, or violence, although frustration may also propel positive processes via enhanced effort and strive. This broad range of potential outcomes makes it difficult to identify the original cause of frustration, as the responses may be indirect. However, a more direct and common response is a propensity towards aggression. Political polarization, spelled polarization in British English, Australian English, and New Zealand English, is the divergence of political attitudes away from the centre towards ideological extremes. Scholars distinguish between ideological polarization, differences between the policy positions, and affective polarization, an emotional dislike and distrust of political outgroups. Most discussions of polarization in political science consider polarization in the context of political parties and democratic systems of government. In two-party systems, political polarization usually embodies the tension of its binary political ideologies and partisan identities. However, some political scientists assert that contemporary polarization depends less on policy differences on a left and right scale, but increasingly on other divisions such as religious against secular, nationalist against globalist, traditional against modern, or rural against urban. Polarization is associated with the process of politicization. Conflict escalation is the process by which conflicts grow in severity or scale over time. That may refer to conflicts between individuals or groups in interpersonal relationships, or it may refer to the escalation of hostilities in a political or military context. In systems theory, the process of conflict escalation is modeled by positive feedback. Conflict escalation can be modeled with game theory. In contrast, de-escalation are approaches which lead to a decrease or end of a conflict. Hit-and-run tactics are a tactical doctrine of using short surprise attacks withdrawing before the enemy can respond in force and constantly maneuvering to avoid full engagement with the enemy. The purpose is not to decisively defeat the enemy or capture territory, but to weaken enemy forces over time through raids, harassment and skirmishing, and limiting risk to friendly forces. Such tactics can also expose enemy defensive weaknesses and achieve a psychological effect on the enemy's morale. Hit and run is a favoured tactic where the enemy overmatches the attacking force and any sustained combat is to be avoided, such as guerrilla warfare, militant resistance movements, and terrorism. However, regular army forces often employ hit-and-run tactics in the short term, usually in preparation for a later full-scale engagement with the enemy when and where conditions are more favourable. Examples of the latter include commando or other special forces attacks, reconnaissance in force, or sorties from a fortress, castle, or other strongpoint. Hit-and-run tactics were also used by the lightly armed horse archers, typical of the Eurasian steppe peoples, who excelled at them. That holds especially true for such troops that were not part of a large army, such as scouting parties, but it was common to see them employed in such a way, even as part of a major force. An insurgency is a violent, armed rebellion by small, lightly armed bands who practice guerrilla warfare against a larger authority. The key descriptive feature of insurgency is its asymmetric nature. Small, irregular forces face a large, well-equipped, regular military force state adversary. Due to this asymmetry, insurgents avoid large-scale direct battles, opting instead to blend in with the civilian population, often in rural areas, where they gradually expand territorial control and military forces. Insurgency frequently hinges on control of and collaboration with local populations. An insurgency can be fought via counter-insurgency warfare, as well as other political, economic and social actions of various kinds. Due to the blending of insurgents with the civilian population, insurgencies tend to involve considerable violence against civilians, by the state and the insurgents. State attempts to quell insurgencies frequently lead to the infliction of indiscriminate violence, whereas rebel control of territory frequently involves violence against the civilian population. Insurgency sets itself apart from terrorism by aiming for political control rather than resorting to indiscriminate violence, however. It may incorporate terrorist tactics.